The ritual was as predictable as the sunrise, though far less welcome. Every Friday morning, after meticulously balancing his household ledger down to the last penny, George would clear his throat. That was my cue to look up from my coffee, to arrange my face into the expected expression of mild gratitude. He would carefully count out the bills, 5 crisp $10 notes, and slide them across the polished oak table. "Here you go, Martha," he'd say, his tone the one he probably used on junior clerks who made accounting errors. Patronizing, weary. $50. Try not to spend it all on nonsense this week. He'd shake his head, a little sigh escaping his lips. "Honestly, after 40 years, you still haven't learned the value of a dollar. It's a good thing you have me to manage things. You're just a housewife after all, useless with money." I'd take the money, the paper smooth beneath my fingertips. The familiar heat would rise in my cheeks, that old, impotent mixture of shame and simmering anger. But decades of practice had taught me to swallow it down, to offer the faint, practiced smile. "Thank you, George." $50. The words echoed silently in my mind. That wouldn't even cover the cost of the new batch of cobalt blue glaze I ordered last night from the supplier in Italy. He handed it to me like a child's allowance, the same lecture on thrift repeated week after week, year after year. He had absolutely no idea about the quiet clicks of my keyboard late into the night, long after his rhythmic snoring began. He had no clue about the shipping notifications pinging softly into my secret email account, confirmations of orders heading to California, New York, even London and Sydney. He had no concept that the nonsense I crafted in the dusty corner of the basement, the things he called my mud pies, had brought in just over $10,000 last month alone. He saw a useless housewife, someone whose greatest financial achievement was finding canned tomatoes on sale. He had no idea he was looking at the sole proprietor, the chief designer, and the CEO of Martha's Kiln, a thriving hidden business with a 5-star rating on Etsy. And he certainly had no idea that every dollar deposited, every glowing review received, was fueling a meticulously crafted escape plan. He thought he held the purse strings. He was about to find out I'd woven my own purse, thank you very much, and it was considerably fuller than he could ever imagine. If you're listening to this story, thank you so much for being here. Let us know where you're joining us from in the world, and don't forget to subscribe to become part of our growing community. For over 4 decades, my world had revolved around this house, around George's needs and preferences. It was a comfortable house, I suppose, spotlessly clean because I made sure of it. Meals appeared on the table precisely at 6 p.m. every evening, usually roast chicken or meatloaf, bland and predictable, just the way George liked it. His shirts were always ironed, his coffee brewed exactly to his specifications, the newspaper laid out beside his plate each morning. I was the household manager, the unpaid chef, cleaner, laundress, and general keeper of the peace. My work was invisible, taken for granted, unworthy of comment unless something was amiss. The cozy atmosphere, the smell of freshly baked bread on Saturdays, the gleaming surfaces, those were my creations. But they were credited solely to the ambient magic of home, not to my labor. George, on the other hand, was very visible, very present, especially since his retirement from the accounting firm 2 years ago. He filled his days with numbers, spreadsheets tracking their investments I was never consulted on, his blood pressure, the gas mileage on the car. He'd sit at the oak table for hours, surrounded by papers, muttering about market fluctuations or the rising cost of property taxes. His control over the household finances was absolute. I was required to produce receipts for every grocery run, every tube of toothpaste. Any expenditure deemed frivolous, a new gardening magazine, a slightly more expensive brand of tea, would trigger a lecture on budgeting. It wasn't about saving for a rainy day anymore. They were financially secure. It was about power. His power. My dependence. He didn't just dismiss my financial sense. He dismissed me. My opinions on politics were uninformed. What would a housewife know about fiscal policy? My interest in literature was trivial. Spending money on novels when the library is free? And my greatest passion, my pottery, was the subject of his most consistent scorn. Down in the cool, slightly damp basement, tucked away behind the furnace and the old washing machine, was my sanctuary. It wasn't much. A sturdy workbench, a second-hand pottery wheel, shelves lined with bags of clay and jars of mysterious powders, and the crown jewel, my electric kiln, bought years ago with saved-up birthday money and proceeds from selling a few pieces at a church bazaar, much to George's disapproval. Here, surrounded by the earthy scent of clay and the hum of the wheel, I felt like myself. My hands, usually busy scrubbing or chopping or folding, found their true purpose shaping the yielding earth, transforming a lump of gray clay into a graceful vase, a whimsical mug, or a perfectly balanced bowl. It was a kind of magic, a quiet conversation between my hands and the material. The hours I spent down there, lost in concentration, were the only times I felt truly free, truly competent. George hated it. He called it my mud pie factory. He complained about the mess, though I kept my corner meticulously tidy. He grumbled about the cost of clay and glazes, which I paid for out of my meager allowance or by skimping elsewhere. He especially hated the kiln. Running up the electricity bill with that ridiculous oven, he'd grouse whenever he saw me heading downstairs. Playing with dirt like a child. It's a pointless, expensive hobby, Martha. He never once really looked at anything I made. The shift began about 5 years ago. My dearest friend, Carol, dragged me somewhat reluctantly into participating in the annual fall craft fair at her church. I brought along a few modest pieces, some simple mugs, a couple of planters. I remember feeling terribly self-conscious, arranging them on the little card table Carol had secured for me. Carol, bless her heart, was effusive. "Martha, these are wonderful. Look at this glaze." She held up a mug, turning it in the light. People stopped. They touched the pottery. They asked questions. And wonder of wonders, they bought things. By the end of the day, I'd sold almost everything I'd brought, holding a small wad of cash in my hand that felt like a fortune. "See?" Carol beamed, squeezing my arm. "I told you. You're amazing. You have to do something with this talent, Martha. You should sell these online. On Etsy, maybe? People all over the world would love your work." I initially dismissed the idea. Me? Sell things online? I barely knew how to check my email. And the thought of George finding out, the ridicule, the accusations of wasting time, it was unthinkable. But Carol is persistent. She saw something in me, in my work, that I hadn't dared to see myself. She helped me take decent photos against the backdrop of her lovely garden wall, far from George's critical eyes. She patiently walked me through setting up an Etsy shop, choosing a name, Martha's Kiln, simple, unassuming. The first few months were slow. A sale here, a sale there. Mostly friends of Carol's, I suspected. But I kept at it, fueled by a flicker of defiant hope. I watched online tutorials about pottery techniques, glaze chemistry, even basic product photography using my old smartphone. I experimented, developed my own style. Elegant forms, often inspired by nature, with unique layered glazes that became my signature. I learned to write descriptions that conveyed the feel and the story behind each piece. Slowly, organically, things started to change. A trickle of orders became a steady stream. People left glowing reviews. Then came the breakthrough. A well-known home decor blogger stumbled upon my shop and featured one of my vase designs, a tall, slender piece with a drippy, deep green glaze I called Forest Rain. Suddenly, my phone was pinging constantly with order notifications. My little basement operation exploded. Keeping up with demand became a challenge, requiring late nights and strategic, stealthy trips to the post office. The income surged past anything I could have imagined. That financial success was validating, empowering in a way I hadn't expected. But the real catalyst for change, the thing that hardened my quiet resolve into an unshakable plan, was George himself. His dismissiveness didn't lessen with retirement, it intensified. He needed to feel important, in control, and his easiest target was me. There was the incident when my sister Helen fell ill several states away. I wanted to fly out to help her for a week. George flatly refused to authorize the expense. "Nonsense," he'd declared. "She has her own children. Besides, plane tickets are outrageously expensive. We need to be prudent." He said it calmly, reasonably, as if discussing stock options, not my sister's well-being or my desire to be there for her. It hit me then. His control wasn't just about money. It was about controlling me, my connections, my emotions. Another time, at a neighborhood barbecue, he'd chuckled loudly when someone asked me what I did all day. "Oh, Martha," he'd said, waving a dismissive hand. "She keeps busy with her, pottery." He made it sound like making macaroni necklaces. "Bless her heart, she tries. Not exactly bringing home the bacon, though, are you, dear?" He winked at the neighbors, inviting them to share the joke. I saw the pitying smiles. The humiliation burned. That was the moment. Staring at the balance in my secret PayPal account that night, seeing the numbers climb higher and higher, I knew. This money wasn't just for better glazes or a newer kiln anymore. This wasn't just a hobby or a secret source of pride. This was my escape fund. This was my ticket out. The fuzzy dream of someday finding my independence snapped into sharp focus. I needed a plan. And the first, most crucial step was securing the money, putting it somewhere his meticulous fingers and judgmental eyes could never, ever reach. I needed my own bank account. $50 lay on the table. George's weekly reminder of my supposed incompetence. $10,000 sat waiting in a digital realm he didn't even know existed. He thought he held all the cards. He had no idea I was about to deal myself a whole new hand. But how does a useless housewife, whose every trip to the grocery store is timed and accounted for, simply walk into a bank in another town and open a secret account? Especially when married to a retired accountant who could probably smell an unaccounted-for dollar from a mile away. It would require careful planning, precise execution, and a little bit of acting. Skills I had unknowingly honed over 40 years of managing George. The first act of my liberation was about to begin. The $50 felt strangely light in my pocket that Friday, almost irrelevant. My mind was already miles away, mapping out the logistics of Operation Independence, Phase 1, securing the funds. George, oblivious, immersed himself in his spreadsheets, humming tunelessly, a sure sign he was pleased with his own fiscal prudence. Opening a bank account sounds simple enough, but when your life partner monitors your movements and interrogates you about any deviation from routine, simple tasks become covert operations. I needed a bank George had no connection with, preferably one outside our immediate neighborhood, and I needed a solid block of time when my absence wouldn't raise alarms. George, creature of habit that he was, provided the opportunity himself. Every third Tuesday of the month, he attended the retired accountant's luncheon club meeting across town. It was a 3-hour affair, including travel time. a sacred ritual he never missed. That gave me a window. I spent evenings discreetly researching banks online, using the private browsing mode on my old tablet late at night. I settled on a reputable credit union in Millersburg, the next town over. They had good online services and, crucially, were nowhere near George's usual haunts. The designated Tuesday arrived, draped in ordinary sunshine. I waved George off with my usual practiced smile, murmuring something about needing to pick up extra fabric softener from the big supermarket near Millersburg, a plausible excuse for the longer drive. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. The drive to Millersburg felt illicit, exhilarating. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see George's sensible sedan tailing me. My palms were damp on the steering wheel. What if someone saw me? What if the bank teller asked awkward questions? The credit union was bright, modern, and thankfully quiet. I approached the counter, clutching my driver's license and the initial deposit, a few $100s in cash I had carefully skimmed from craft fair sales over the past year, hidden away in an old tea caddy. A pleasant young woman named Sarah greeted me. Explaining I wanted to open a personal savings and checking account felt like uttering a secret code. She asked the usual questions, her manner professional and incurious. When she asked about statements, I specified, "Online only. Please, no paper mail." Sarah simply ticked a box. No judgment, no suspicion, just business. Walking out 20 minutes later with a temporary debit card and deposit slips bearing only my name, Martha Ellen Albright, felt like shedding a heavy cloak I hadn't realized I was wearing. The sense of accomplishment was immense, dizzying. I drove to the supermarket, bought the fabric softener and a few other sundries to make the trip look legitimate, carefully tucking the bank documents deep inside my purse beneath the groceries. Phase 1 complete. The foundation was laid. Now came the delicate dance of living two lives under one roof. My pottery business, Martha's Kiln, continued its quiet boom. Orders poured in, not just from across the country, but increasingly from overseas. Managing it became my secret full-time job, crammed into the margins of my real life as George's wife. My days still followed the rhythm George dictated: meals, cleaning, errands. But my nights became mine. After George fell asleep, usually promptly at 10:15 after the nightly news, I would creep down to my basement sanctuary. The internet connection was weaker down there, but my tablet worked well enough. I'd answer customer emails, update listings, process payments through my secure Etsy portal, which now deposited directly into my secret Millersburg account. Packing orders was the biggest logistical challenge. I learned to work quickly, silently, assembling boxes, wrapping fragile pottery in layers of bubble wrap, scavenged from deliveries Carol received for me, printing shipping labels on a small, quiet printer hidden behind a stack of old towels. Late at night, the basement glowed softly, not just from the single bare bulb overhead, but from the screen of my tablet and the quiet intensity of my focus. Shipping required ingenuity. I couldn't have delivery trucks pulling up to the house constantly. Larger supply orders, clay, packing materials, bulk glazes, I arranged to have delivered to Carol's house. She became my willing co-conspirator, storing boxes in her garage until I could collect them during fabricated visits or errands. For outgoing packages, I became a connoisseur of post office drop-off times. I'd combine trips with grocery shopping, visits to the library, or appointments I invented. My car trunk often held more carefully packed pottery than reusable shopping bags. George, obsessed with mileage and gas consumption, sometimes noted my extra trips, but my excuses, searching for a specific brand of coffee he liked, returning a library book just before closing, seemed to satisfy his need for logical explanations. The stress was undeniable. There were close calls. One Saturday morning, George decided, on a whim, to clean out the garage. I nearly had a heart attack remembering a large box of bubble wrap Carol had dropped off the day before, tucked behind the lawnmower. I managed to distract him by discovering a supposed mouse dropping in the kitchen pantry, sending him off on a determined hunt for traps while I hastily moved the box to my car. Another time, he picked up my tablet, idly swiping through screens while I was making lunch. He scoffed at the Etsy app icon. "Still playing with that online thing? Surprised you haven't bankrupted us buying more craft junk." He had no idea the app represented my financial independence. I almost choked on my sandwich. Yet, alongside the stress, a profound sense of empowerment grew. Watching the balance in my Millersburg account climb steadily was intoxicating. 5 figures, then steadily growing toward 6. I started researching basic investment options, reading articles about mutual funds and bonds late at night. It turned out I wasn't useless with money at all. I was actually quite good at managing it when it was mine to manage. I even started using a simple online accounting software to track my business income and expenses. The irony wasn't lost on me. George, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware, locked in his world of perceived control. His retirement hadn't mellowed him. If anything, it made him more critical, more focused on my perceived shortcomings. He had more time to supervise, to find fault. "Martha, are you burning electricity down there again?" He'd call down the basement stairs, his voice sharp with irritation, just as I was carefully monitoring a crucial glaze firing in the kiln. "That hobby of yours is costing a fortune." He never asked what I was making, never showed the slightest interest. One evening, I was carefully photographing a newly finished set of nesting bowls, a beautiful stoneware with a delicate celadon crackle glaze I was particularly proud of. George wandered over, peering down his nose. "More mud pies?" he sniffed. "Honestly, Martha, when are you going to grow up and find something useful to do with your time?" "Useful?" I thought, biting back a retort. "This mud pie just paid for what would have been your contribution to our property taxes this year, George." But outwardly, I just murmured, "It keeps me busy, dear." My lifeline through all this was Carol. We met for coffee whenever I could engineer a legitimate reason to be out of the house alone. Sitting across from her in a noisy cafe booth felt like entering a different reality, one where I wasn't just George's wife, but Martha, the successful artisan, the secret entrepreneur. "Look at this," I'd whisper, showing her the latest sales figures on my phone, my eyes shining. "Martha, that's incredible," she'd whisper back, squeezing my hand across the table. "I knew you could do it." She listened patiently to my anxieties, the fear of discovery, the exhaustion of maintaining the facade, the guilt that sometimes gnawed at me despite everything. She never judged. She just offered unwavering support and practical advice. "Get a separate post office box for any business mail," she suggested one day. "Use my address for the really sensitive stuff." She became my silent partner, my cheerleader, the one person who saw the capable, independent woman hidden beneath the compliant housewife persona George perceived. The contrast between my 2 lives grew starker every day. In the quiet hum of my basement studio and the anonymous glow of my tablet screen, I was competent, respected, financially independent. Upstairs, in the bright light of the kitchen, I was still Martha, the dutiful wife, carefully counting out grocery money, nodding silently through George's lectures on economy, handing him his coffee just the way he liked it. The disconnect was becoming harder to maintain. The compliant mask felt heavier, more suffocating. The secret, once a source of private satisfaction, was starting to feel like a cage of its own. I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building momentum for a change that felt both terrifying and utterly necessary. The question was no longer if I would leave, but when and how. One rain-slicked Tuesday evening, while George was engrossed in a televised documentary about the history of income tax, his idea of thrilling entertainment, I logged into my secret Millersburg credit union account. The numbers on the screen glowed softly in the dim basement light. I had to blink, then blink again. The balance had finally crossed the six-figure threshold. Enough, I calculated quickly, fingers trembling slightly as I did the mental math, to make a substantial down payment on a small condo, maybe even cover the first year's mortgage payments entirely. Seeing it there, solid and real, $100,000 in change earned by my hands, my skill, my secret labor, sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated power through me. It wasn't just an escape fund anymore. It was a declaration. Independence wasn't a distant dream. It was a tangible possibility sitting right there on the screen. My euphoria, however, was short-lived. A few days later came the moment that nearly blew my carefully constructed world apart. I had received a large, unexpected order for a set of custom dinnerware requiring specific glazes I didn't have on hand. The supplier offered expedited shipping, but the box, larger than usual, arrived via FedEx on a day George happened to be home puttering in the garden. I saw the truck pull up from the kitchen window, my heart leaping into my throat. Praying George wouldn't notice, I rushed to the door, signed for the package, and quickly hustled the bulky box towards the basement stairs. Just as I reached the top step, George came inside, wiping muddy hands on his trousers. "What's that, Martha?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly at the unfamiliar shipping label. "Expecting something?" "Oh, just some extra heavy-duty cleaning supplies I ordered online, dear," I stammered, improvising wildly. "Bulk discount, you know. Saving money." My cheeks felt flushed. He grunted, seemingly accepting the explanation, but then his eyes drifted towards the basement door. "Speaking of the basement, I need to find that old pipe wrench. Think I left it down there somewhere after fixing that leaky faucet last year." Panic seized me. The basement! My workspace was relatively tidy, but there were clues everywhere. Finished pieces wrapped for shipping, stacked in a corner I usually kept hidden behind a tarp. Bags of expensive German clay, printouts of glaze recipes. If he started rummaging around. "Actually, George," I said quickly, stepping in front of the basement door, trying to sound casual, "I think I saw that wrench in the garage yesterday, behind the fertilizer bags. Why don't you check there first while I put this, heavy soap away?" He hesitated, peering at me. Did he suspect something? Or was it just my own guilt making me paranoid? Thankfully, his innate laziness won out over his curiosity. "Garage? All right. Easier than tackling those stairs anyway," he muttered, turning towards the back door. I practically threw the box down the basement stairs and scrambled after it, heart pounding like a drum. I quickly shoved the wrapped pottery further out of sight, kicked stray packing peanuts under the workbench, and threw an old drop cloth over the bags of clay just as George called out from the garage, "Nope, not here. Must be in the basement after all." I met him at the bottom of the stairs, feigning mild annoyance. "Honestly, George, maybe if you put things back where they belong." I steered him towards the rusty toolbox in the far corner, deliberately away from my workspace, located the wrench for him, and bustled him back upstairs as quickly as possible. The near miss left me shaken for days. The constant vigilance, the elaborate lies, the gut-wrenching fear of discovery. It was exhausting. That night, staring at the ceiling, I knew I couldn't sustain this double life indefinitely. The risk was too great. The six-figure balance in my secret account wasn't just a safety net anymore. It was a mandate. It was time to stop planning my escape and start executing it. The fear of being caught suddenly felt more acute than the fear of leaving. My focus shifted. Late-night web searches changed from glaze techniques to real estate listings in towns within an hour's drive. Far enough for independence, close enough to maintain contact with Carol and, if I chose, my children. I started bookmarking small houses, condos with decent light, essential for a pottery studio, places that whispered of solitude and self-determination. Carol, ever practical, put me in touch with a female financial advisor she knew, a woman named Diane, who specialized in helping women achieve financial independence. Our first meeting, conducted over coffee in a town where I was unlikely to be recognized, was a revelation. I laid out my situation: the secret business, the hidden account, the desire to leave my controlling husband. Diane didn't bat an eye. She looked at my spreadsheets. Yes, I had spreadsheets. Or my sales projections, my Etsy dashboard. "Martha," she said, her voice warm but professional, "you haven't just built a hobby. You've built a viable, profitable business. You're not useless with money. You're an entrepreneur." Hearing those words from a financial professional validated me in a way nothing else had. Diane helped me structure a conservative investment plan for a portion of my savings, designed for stability and long-term growth. She also gave me the name of a reputable female divorce attorney, just for a preliminary consultation, so you understand your rights regarding assets. Armed with this new knowledge and professional support, I began actively searching for my future home. I arranged viewings during George's predictable absences, telling him I was meeting Carol for lunch or attending a fictional book club meeting. Seeing actual properties, a charming little bungalow with a sunroom perfect for a wheel, a modern condo with a balcony overlooking a park, made my future feel incredibly real. I found the one. A small 2-bedroom cottage on a quiet street in a town about 40 minutes away. It had a detached garage that screamed studio potential. I started the clandestine process of making an offer, using my secret funds and Diane's guidance. Meanwhile, George, completely oblivious to the tectonic shifts happening beneath the surface of our lives, continued his reign of petty tyranny. It was as if, sensing my internal withdrawal, he ramped up his efforts to assert control, providing the final, unintentional shoves I needed. He announced one evening, without any prior discussion, that he'd decided they would sell the current house within the next 2 years. "Too big for us now," he declared, folding his newspaper decisively. "We'll move into one of those senior living condos. Much more economical. I've already requested brochures." My blood ran cold. Sell our home, the repository of 40 years of my life, without even asking me? Move into some sterile complex he chose? The arrogance was breathtaking. Then came the incident with the photograph. Our granddaughter had sent us a framed picture of herself from her college graduation. I had placed it proudly on the living room mantelpiece. George took it down. "Clutters up the place," he sniffed, tucking it away in a drawer. "Besides, she looks rather plump in that gown, doesn't she?" Criticizing my appearance was one thing. Criticizing our granddaughter was another. It felt like a deliberate cruelty aimed at something I cherished. Each incident, small in itself, chipped away at any lingering tendrils of doubt or misplaced loyalty. He wasn't just controlling. He was dismissive of everything and everyone I cared about. But just as my resolve felt diamond hard, the universe threw me a curveball. My Etsy shop, my reliable engine of independence, hit a sudden slump. A change in the platform's search algorithm, combined with increased competition, saw my sales dip significantly for several weeks. Panic fluttered in my chest. Was this sustainable? Could I really rely on this income long-term? What if George was right? What if my success was just a fluke, a temporary bubble about to burst, leaving me stranded and financially vulnerable just as I was about to leap? The timing felt like a cruel joke. Adding to my internal turmoil, George developed a nasty bout of bronchitis that lingered for weeks. He became genuinely unwell, coughing, wheezing, needing me to bring him soup, fetch his medication, fluff his pillows. He was miserable, pathetic, and utterly dependent on me. Seeing him so frail stirred up complicated emotions: pity, resentment, and a heavy dose of guilt. Could I really walk out on him now when he was sick? Was I that heartless? The carefully constructed walls around my plan seemed to wobble. 40 years of ingrained duty warred with my desperate yearning for freedom. I spent sleepless nights wrestling with my conscience, the image of the charming cottage fading behind the reality of George's hacking cough. It was Carol who helped pull me back from the brink. During a hushed phone call, I confessed my doubts, my guilt, the sales slump. "Martha," she said firmly, but kindly, "a bout of bronchitis doesn't erase 40 years of disrespect. Being sick doesn't give him a free pass. And your business slump? It's temporary. You're smart, you're talented. You'll figure it out. You always do. Don't let fear and guilt sabotage the future you've worked so hard to build." Her words were a much-needed dose of perspective. And she was right about the business. I didn't panic. I strategized. I invested time in learning about Etsy's new algorithm, tweaked my keywords, offered a limited-time promotion on my signature mugs, and designed a stunning new line of serving platters inspired by seashells I'd collected years ago. Slowly, painstakingly, the sales started to pick up again, climbing back towards their previous levels. Overcoming that hurdle, proving to myself I could navigate the challenges of the business world, reignited my confidence. As for George, his recovery only highlighted his true nature. As soon as he felt marginally better, the complaints returned, louder than ever. He whined about the cost of his prescriptions, criticized the soup I made, and grumbled about how my hovering annoyed him. This after demanding constant attention for weeks. The brief flicker of pity I'd felt evaporated, replaced by cold clarity. His illness hadn't changed him. It had merely paused his usual performance. I didn't owe him my future. The last shreds of doubt dissolved. My offer on the cottage was accepted. The closing date was set for the end of the month. I arranged for movers, a small, discreet company, for the following Saturday. I packed boxes late at night in the basement, labeling them vaguely as seasonal storage. I transferred a significant sum from my Millersburg account to cover the closing costs and initial expenses. I met briefly with the lawyer Diane had recommended, confirming my understanding of marital assets versus separate property derived from my own business endeavors prior to formal separation. Everything was falling into place. The new lease agreement, no, the purchase agreement, for the cottage felt solid and real in my hands, a tangible promise of freedom nestled securely in my hidden files. My secret bank account held more security, more future, than 40 years of marriage ever had. Tomorrow was Friday. George would conduct his weekly ritual, the handing over of the $50, the condescending lecture on my financial incompetence. He thought it was just another routine Friday morning. He had no idea it was the opening scene of the final act, an act written, produced, and directed entirely by the useless housewife he thought he knew so well. The curtain was about to rise. The week leading up to the closing on my cottage was a blur of clandestine activity. Each evening, after George was asleep, I made trips down to the basement, carefully packing boxes. Not clothes or linens, those could be replaced, but the essentials of my true life. My best pottery tools, my precious glaze recipe notebooks, boxes of signature pieces I couldn't bear to leave behind, the small quiet printer, my tablet, and the files related to Martha's kiln. I labeled them innocuously: craft supplies, donate, old files, and stacked them near the basement door, ready for the discreet moving company Carol had helped me arrange for Saturday morning, when George would inevitably be out for his ritualistic 2-hour drive to scout for discounted birdseed. I triple-checked the documents in the slim leather portfolio I'd bought myself, my secret indulgence. Crisp copies of the Millersburg bank statements, showing the steady, impressive deposits and the formidable balance. A neatly printed summary sheet detailing the last 12 months of income and expenses for Martha's kiln. Profit margins clearly indicated. Printouts of glowing customer reviews. Documentation for the mutual funds Diane had helped me select. And nestled right on top, the signed purchase agreement for the cottage on Elm Street, complete with the closing date just 2 days prior. Everything was ready. All that remained was the performance. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, mocking the storm about to break inside the tidy house on Maple Street. George sat at the head of the table, finishing his oatmeal, the financial section of the newspaper spread before him. He cleared his throat. The ritual began. He counted out the 5 $10 bills. "Here you go, Martha." He slid the money across the table. Today, however, he added a particularly sharp addendum, perhaps sensing my unusual stillness, my lack of the usual downward glance. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. $50. Try not to lose it. Honestly, with that head of yours, you probably couldn't be trusted to manage a piggy bank. It's a damn good thing you've had me handling the finances all these years. Otherwise, you'd likely be out on the street by now, wouldn't you? There it was. The ultimate dismissal. The casual erasure of my 40 years of running this household, raising our children, managing everything except the money he hoarded. The simmering anger I'd suppressed for decades didn't flare up. Instead, a strange, icy calm settled over me. I didn't reach for the $50. Slowly, deliberately, I reached beside my chair for the leather portfolio. I placed it on the table and opened it with quiet precision. I took out the first document, the latest statement from the Millersburg Credit Union, the 6-figure balance clearly visible, and laid it gently on top of his newspaper. Then came the profit and loss summary for Martha's kiln. Then the investment portfolio statement. Finally, the purchase agreement for the cottage, my name listed as the sole buyer. I arranged them neatly, side by side, like place settings, for a meal he never knew was being prepared. George stopped chuckling. He stared at the papers, his brow furrowed in confusion. He picked up the bank statement, his eyes scanning the numbers, widening in disbelief. What is this?" he stammered, his voice losing its confident bluster. "Millersburg Credit Union? I don't bank there. This amount." His gaze flickered to the business summary, then to the house deed. Recognition, followed by utter bewilderment, dawned on his face. "Martha's kiln? That basement hobby? This can't be right. Where did this money come from?" His face flushed crimson. The confusion morphed into sputtering rage. "You've been hiding this? Lying to me?" He half rose from his chair, his hand reaching as if to snatch the papers away, to make them disappear. I met his gaze evenly. My voice when I spoke was low, steady, devoid of the tremor I'd expected. It was the voice of a woman finally speaking her own truth. "George," I began, keeping my tone level, "that is the money I have earned myself over the past several years from my pottery business. The basement hobby you always found so useless." I paused, letting the words sink in. "While you were handing me $50 a week and telling me I was incompetent with money, I was building a successful online business. I opened my own bank account. I learned about investing. I managed my finances quite well, as you can see. I gestured towards the purchase agreement. And I will no longer be needing my allowance or this house. I bought a small cottage on Elm Street. I closed on it Wednesday. I'm moving out this weekend. I believe the term is lithan, George. Separation. He stared at me, truly stared, as if seeing a stranger. The rage seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a gaping incomprehension, then something akin to panic. Separate? Move out? You can't just do that, Martha. This is our home. And that money, that's marital property. Anything you earned while we're married, that's half mine. I'll see you in court. I'll take half. The bluster was back, but weaker now, laced with desperation. I had anticipated this. I took a slow breath. I've already had a preliminary consultation with an attorney, George. Income derived from my separate efforts and kept in a separate account before formal separation might be viewed differently. But, I added, delivering the final quiet blow, I'm sure our lawyers can discuss the specifics. That last sentence, the calm mention of lawyers, my lawyer, seemed to deflate him completely. He sank back into his chair, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. The meticulous accountant, the master controller, had just discovered his entire world was based on faulty data, on a gross underestimation of his primary asset, or liability, as he likely now saw me. He looked lost, bewildered, utterly stripped of his power. I didn't wait for him to recover. There was nothing left to say. I stood up from the table, leaving the $50 untouched beside the portfolio of my independence. I walked calmly to the hall closet, retrieved the small overnight bag I had packed with essentials, and walked towards the front door. I didn't look back. The click of the door closing behind me was the quietest, yet most definitive, sound I had ever made. Driving away from the house on Maple Street, I didn't feel sadness or regret. Just an overwhelming sense of lightness, as if I'd finally set down a burden I hadn't realized was so heavy. I drove straight to the cottage on Elm Street. Stepping over the threshold of my own home, bought with my own money, was the most liberating moment of my life. The rooms were small, filled with afternoon sunlight, smelling of fresh paint and possibility. I walked through each one, touching the walls, imagining where my pottery wheel would go, where I would sit to drink my morning coffee. I unpacked my small bag, then called Carol. I did it, I told her, my voice thick with emotion. But this time it was tears of joy. The following weeks involved adjustments, of course. George, through a lawyer, made noises about reconciliation, then about fighting for assets. But faced with the clear documentation of my separate business and funds, established long before the separation, his case weakened considerably. We eventually reached a settlement regarding the Maple Street house and shared assets that felt fair, leaving my business and my cottage untouched. I informed our children, who were initially shocked, but after hearing my side of the story, gently, without excessive blame, came to understand and support my decision. Now, a year later, life is unrecognizably sweet. Martha's kiln is flourishing. I hired a part-time college student to help with packing and shipping, freeing me up to focus on creating. My little cottage is my haven, filled with light, music, and the comforting scent of clay. The garage is now a fully functional studio, my sanctuary. I eat what I want, when I want. I joined a local art league, made new friends who admire my work, not just tolerate my hobby. Last month, I took a week-long trip to Santa Fe, exploring galleries and immersing myself in the art scene, something I'd only dreamed of doing. Sometimes, sitting in my sunny studio, shaping a piece of clay on the wheel, I think back to those Friday mornings, The $50 slid across the table, the casual pronouncements of my uselessness. It feels like a scene from someone else's life. I manage my own finances now, tracking income, paying bills, making investment decisions with Diane's continued guidance. It turns out I have quite a knack for it. The $50 allowance seems laughable now, a symbol of a life so constrained, so underestimated. I don't feel anger towards George anymore. Mostly just a distant pity for a man so blinded by his need for control that he couldn't see the value, the potential, the whole person sitting right across the table from him. Carol tells me he seems adrift, rattling around the big house alone, complaining to anyone who will listen about how ungrateful I was. My worth is no longer tied to his approval or the tidiness of a house. It's reflected in the beautiful things I create, the successful business I run, the peaceful, independent life I've built for myself, one careful, deliberate step at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. It took me 40 years to find my voice, but discovering my own strength and independence was worth every challenging step. Never let anyone define your worth or limit your potential, no matter your age or circumstances. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading them. And subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and finding freedom. Remember to cherish your own talents, big or small. Until next time, take care and keep shining. Goodbye.